Welcome to the Hoja on Architecture podcast. Concept in Design, Chapter 7, Pedagogy, Teaching Concept. In the previous episode, we examined concept as a narrative framework, an organizational system that integrates form, function, and feeling into a cohesive design logic. How do we teach students to develop this framework? How do we guide them from scattered observations and intuitive insights to a stable conceptual foundation? Narrative logic serves as the critical pedagogical tool in this process. Through narrative logic, students can structure their thoughts, articulate their concepts, and begin to think of design not just as a visual composition but as a narrative sequence. This episode explores how narrative logic can be used to teach concept development, brief design thinking, and assess creative ideas in an educational context. Design education is often defined by its focus on technical skills, learning to draw, to make models, to use software, and to create representations of space. However, behind every design decision lies a deeper intellectual process, the generation of ideas. Ideas, however, do not simply appear fully formed. They emerge from a process of critical thinking, pattern recognition, and logical organization. The teaching concept concerns guiding students in managing this process, moving from vague intuition to specific conceptual clarity. It's about transforming design into a mental exercise, one in which they think through their decisions before making them. Narrative logic provides the conceptual framework to achieve this. In the same way that stories are constructed with a beginning, middle, and end, so too must concepts unfold. This idea of storytelling is not simply a poetic metaphor, it's a structuring principle. Concepts, when formed correctly, behave like stories. They have clear intentions, defined arcs, and sequences of moments. Each design decision should serve a larger narrative, guiding the user through a space much like a storyteller leads an audience through a plot. In this context, the designer is not merely a creator of space, but also a creator of experiences, guiding the user through the design's narrative. To teach concept development effectively, we must begin by framing the narrative logic for students. The first step is to ensure that students understand what a concept is and how it functions. Too often, students approach a concept as an aesthetic idea or a vague notion. It's important to clarify that the concept is not about decoration, but about structure. It is the framework that organizes everything the project becomes. Without this structure, design becomes chaotic. Teaching students to view a concept as a narrative structure helps them understand that every design decision must serve a greater purpose, contributing to the space's overarching story. Once students understand the role of narrative in concept development, the next step is to guide them in generating concepts. This is where narrative logic becomes particularly useful. Just as a writer might plan the plot of a story, identifying the rising action, the climax, and the resolution, a designer must plan the narrative structure of their project. In this context, narrative logic serves as a guiding principle for each phase of the design process, helping students identify the sequence of events in their conceptual development. It provides a roadmap for how their idea will unfold over time, from initial concept to final form. Students learn that every element of design, from materials and proportions to circulation and light, must be aligned with the narrative they wish to tell. One of the most critical pedagogical tasks when teaching a concept is to encourage students to justify their design decisions. This is where the role of narrative logic becomes vital. Without it, students often struggle to explain why certain decisions were made, resorting to vague or subjective statements like, "I think it looks nice," or "I felt like it should be this way." Narrative logic, however, requires students to ground their decisions in a coherent argument. They must ask, "How does this decision support the story I want to tell?" Teaching students to justify their choices with logic and reasoning is essential for developing their critical thinking skills. It helps them move from intuitive design to conceptual argumentation. This ability to articulate their decisions clearly, confidently, and logically is what separates a strong concept from a weak one. Assessing concept development in students requires a shift in how we evaluate design work. Traditional assessments of design often focus on visual outcomes. How well is the design rendered? How aesthetically pleasing is the result? While these aspects are essential, they are not central to concept development. Concept assessment must focus on coherence and logic. Does the concept have a clear narrative structure? Does it have direction and purpose? Does it guide the user through a coherent experience? Does it make sense as a whole? Narrative logic provides tools for evaluating these aspects of a concept, asking not only whether a design looks good, but also whether it tells a meaningful story, one that users can engage with and understand intuitively. This approach to assessment not only improves the quality of students' work, but also encourages a deeper engagement with the design process. Students no longer rely on subjective opinions or superficial judgments of beauty. Instead, they learn to evaluate their work based on a set of internal principles: the strength of their concept, the clarity of their narrative, and the coherence of their decisions. In this way, teaching concepts through narrative logic promotes self-reflection, encouraging students to be critical of their work and to improve it continually. This reflective process is essential for developing their creative abilities and for building their confidence as designers. Teaching concepts through narrative logic also strengthens the relationship among form, function, and feeling. These three components must always be aligned with the concept. They must be expressions of the same underlying idea. When a student understands that a concept is a narrative framework, they learn that form is not a free-floating aesthetic choice, but a response to the concept's logic. Similarly, function is not an afterthought or a technical requirement. It is an integral part of the concept's story. Finally, feeling, the emotional atmosphere of a space, is not something that is added on at the end of the process. It is embedded in the concept from the beginning as part of the narrative structure. Next time, we explore how to communicate design concepts clearly and memorably using narrative structure to create visual clarity and conceptual impact. This concludes the Concept in Design, Chapter 7, Pedagogy, Teaching Concept. Thanks for listening. See you in the next episode.